I'm talking you need to have like several hour collaborative working sessions with the decision maker every week. This is how close you need to be to the decision maker. Hey there, it's Travis. I'm a former UX researcher. I worked in UX research for 7 years, and now I find myself on a journey to figure out what might be beyond UX and how I might evolve as a designer. And it got me thinking about what was missing in my previous design roles. I hear a lot of designers talk about how they are only building the product and they're not being utilized fully as a designer. Their skills and their talents go unused, maybe underutilized, and they wonder how they can get the influence that they want on the product vision. They want to be able to influence the product vision, but they cannot. And this got me thinking about the analogy of a glass wall. A glass wall prevents us from accessing and modifying the product vision. So in this video, we're going to talk about what the glass wall is and how to overcome it and get the influence that you want as a product designer. So let's start with how a product goes from 0 to 1. First, there's a spark. This is the initial idea of the product, and then that spark might grow into a product vision, which establishes who the product is for and what it should do. And a product team takes this vision and builds it through however many internal stages necessary to get it to the point where it's ready to be shipped. And at this point, if the product is shipped and gets adoption, then the product team has done the impossible and taken something from 0 to 1. But we know as designers that this is not as linear of a process as I just described. So we know that we go through these design loops where you iteratively move towards 1. So that is to say you take 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. You rethink how you designed something, you get feedback on it, and then you improve it. So we're able to do these small design loops in the implementation phase or area of this timeline, and these are the detailed loops. But as we're going about building the product, we learn about the use case and user group, and we eventually find that the vision does not match the reality that we're discovering. So we want to do a big design loop or a vision loop back to the product vision. We need to change some assumptions about the product vision because they're ruining everything downstream from it. But this is prevented by the glass wall. The glass wall prevents us as product designers from modifying the vision. You see, where a lot of designers aren't aware that there's a glass wall behind them that prevents them from going too far backwards. You can do small design loops, but when you get back into the fundamentals, like the product vision, essentially who it is for and what it will do, this is where the company will start to block you in many cases. This is not just the case for the 0 to 1 product. This is also the case for existing products. So if you're a designer on a 1 to N product, you still run into glass walls, except instead of not being able to modify a product vision, instead you're not able to modify a roadmap in this case. So this limits us to builders, and we don't get to design in the full sense of the word. We're just there to implement what decision makers hand us from above. And this isn't a good feeling. I think a lot of designers feel that they don't have agency in this paradigm and that they don't have the influence that they want. And in order to have the influence and impact that you want, I believe you need to have access to the entire range, and you need to be able to at least have a voice when it comes to the product vision. So now let's look at exactly how this glass wall limits us as designers and limits our product teams, so that we can then, in the last part of this video, figure out how to overcome the glass wall. So the product vision starts somewhere in between complete incorrectness and complete correctness, because its assumptions, some of them will be right and others will be wrong. And the product is built up from this vision. So from the vision, you gather requirements, and from the requirements, you come up with features to address them. And then you have an information architecture that needs to include the features. And then you have user interfaces, which are kind of like the details of the information architecture. These are the screens in the app. And then you have a user experience, which is the culmination of everything underneath it. And as designers and product people, we try to build the product as far to the right as possible. We try to make it as good of a product as possible, obviously. But we're limited by the vision, because the vision sort of has this magnetic pull back to its center. That is to say, it constrains everything above it. And it's sort of like moving away from a magnet. So as you get further up and further away from the vision, there are more degrees of freedom that you have as a product designer. So for example, requirements, they are the most constrained by vision, because the product needs to do what it needs to do according to the vision. It's kind of simple. Like, there's not much wiggle room there. But as you move further up, you have more creative control. So for example, as a designer, you have more control over the screens and the user interface and how they're laid out compared to the features in the application. So what this means is that adding everything together, there's only so much that we can do as designers and as a product team to move the product in the right direction, away from the vision. This is how much difference you can make in total. And so the implication is that the product will fail, and there's no amount of design work that can occur if the vision starts too far in the incorrect zone. It starts too far away from user acceptance. This is because, remember, when there's a glass wall, as designers, we're not able to move the vision into a more correct vision. We're not able to pivot away from that original vision or make it more correct. And it's unlikely that the decision makers who are cut off from the ground truth are going to be able to know how to improve the vision to the degree that it needs to improve. So finally, let's talk about how you might overcome this. And the first way, obviously, is to try to break through the glass wall. This implies that you gain influence where you once had no influence. And perhaps this can happen over time. You stay a loyal builder, and if you stay there long enough, maybe you eventually find yourself on the other side of the glass wall. But I have a feeling that waiting like this is not worth it, because I've worked with vice presidents at very large companies that didn't have influence over the product vision or roadmap. They were just taking orders, just like me, from above, but they were managing the team, right? So you can have product managers and even up to vice presidents who can't do much, especially at large companies where the glass walls tend to be thicker. Also, you have to ask yourself, would you want to be on the other side of the glass wall? Would you want to be a decision maker? I think you would just be stepping back into a silo and isolating yourself once again, except this time you would be cut off from the ground truth, from the product teams. My advice is to find a design job where no glass walls are present in the first place. So instead of spending your time and energy trying to break through something, you just avoid it altogether. Now, when you're evaluating design jobs, trying to figure out if there is a glass wall, we run into the problem again that glass walls are difficult to see. And so I give you the following 3 criteria that you can use to judge design jobs, and this will help you detect if glass walls are present before joining. So first, you have to evaluate the organization. You have to understand its structure and its culture. You are looking for an organization that is flat in structure, meaning there's little hierarchy, and that has a startup-like, a loose, a playful culture. You want to go somewhere where you feel comfortable making mistakes, comfortable taking risks, and you need to have this agency about you as well. You need to, self-directed work needs to be something that is not only encouraged at the company, but needed in order to get things done. The second criteria is that you need to determine your distance from decision makers after you join the company. So a decision maker that's far away is no good to you. You need a decision maker that is close. And to make this a hard and fast rule, I'm going to say that you need to be able to personally work with a decision maker on a weekly basis. And I'm not talking about a 30-minute Zoom meeting where you sync at the end of the week and discuss small things about what you did. I'm talking you need to have like several hour collaborative working sessions with the decision maker every week. This is how close you need to be to the decision maker. And finally, you need to be able to influence the decision maker's thinking. You need to have a two-way collaborative relationship with the decision maker. And it can't just be this one-sided thing where the decision maker is too authoritarian and is just giving you orders. So you need to determine if you can build collaborative rapport with the decision maker. This can't really be made into a concrete rule like the last one, but I would say go with your gut feeling when it comes to, do you generally like and respect one another, or does the decision maker seem too authoritative? Now, it's important to point out what I mean by decision maker here. This is kind of like the crux of it all. So when I say decision maker, I mean somebody who can affect the product vision and essentially who decides what is built. This is important to say because middle managers who don't have modification ability to the product vision are not decision makers by this definition. Like I said, I worked with VPs and product managers at large companies who couldn't influence the product division at all. So these aren't the people that you need close to you. A decision maker ideally has the power to veto bad product ideas and also be able to pivot away from one vision to another, something maybe even entirely different than what you were working on before. The first two criteria that I gave you, the fact that an organization is flat and the distance from decision makers, these two things can be determined probably in the first several rounds of interviewing. The third, which is, can you build collaborative rapport with the decision maker? This is more difficult. You probably can't determine this in the first several interviews. You probably are going to have to use your gut feeling on this one, but I think that's okay because the first several months of you being hired is a trial period anyway for both you and the organization. Also, it's important that you have all three of these criteria. So for example, the client-consultant relationship is a good example of having only two and missing the third. So you might have a design consultancy that is flat, and you might work directly with the client, but if you can't influence the client's thinking when it comes to the original vision, then probably nothing else matters. Also, it's really interesting to think about the distance from decision makers at its minimum. So at its absolute minimum, this means a distance of 0, which implies you are the decision maker. And this implies intrapreneurship within a company or startup, or entrepreneurship. You've gone and done your own thing. So if you come up with the idea, then you own the vision and you own the product. So I really don't know any better way than to get a seat at the table than if you built the table yourself. So in summary, you need personal access to and collaborative rapport with the decision makers at a company that is flat and startup-like. I think this is the minimum for what you need to get the influence that you want, to be able to act as a full-ranging designer. In the full sense of the word, you'll be able to design. Your design loops will be able to loop back and modify the product vision. And I think this solves the powerless feeling that a lot of designers have. They're working on products that they don't really believe in. Before the first version of that product ships, maybe they think this isn't even going to work anyway because they can't sort out all of the baggage that came before it, which was baked in at the time that the product vision was formed.